Hey friend, welcome to Calligraphy Biz Corner, where we spill the ink on our real-life experiences as creative biz owners.
We're your hosts, Elaine and Shaochen, full-time wedding calligraphers and business educators with over a decade of experience working with wedding, luxury, and corporate clients, and we've mentored hundreds of calligraphers just like you.
And we're in your corner. Let's uncover the business that supports the life that you want and leave the overwhelm and imposter syndrome behind. Grab your coffee and notebook and let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to Calligraphy Biz Corner. Today, we are going to share key ways to navigate stress and avoid burnout during busier seasons in both your business and your life. As Shaochen and I were drafting the notes for this episode, we both realized that we are incredibly well primed to chat about this topic today because we have both had packed schedules lately. We've been juggling a multitude of things. And it's been a bit overwhelming at times, to say the least. So between weddings, bringing the podcast back for fall, building and launching the podcast website, and then any ongoing client work, there have been so many opportunities for both of us to experience stress and burnout recently. But we have both been finding ways to navigate through those challenges, through the struggles of busy season. And we are excited to share them with you today in the hopes that they help you navigate your own busier seasons in life. So we are currently in the midst of wedding season in the Northeast. Is that the same for Colorado too?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then any live event calligraphers that are tuning in, we know that you're probably about to head into your busy holiday season. So we figured that September was a perfect time for today's episode just to help set you up for success when things do get busy.
So before we dive into today's content, we're going to share some actual tactical tips for you on this topic. But before we dive in, there's a few things that we just want to catch you up on really quickly. So first of all, if you've been enjoying our podcast, you can help us fuel the podcast by buying us some coffee. We would so appreciate your support if our podcast has helped your business in any way. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/calligraphy biz corner, or we also have a link in the show notes where you can buy us 1 coffee, 5 coffees, however many you want. And so huge shout out to our listeners who have done this already, including Kara of the Kara Report and Kimmy of the Kimmy Collective, as well as some anonymous donors. We can't thank you enough. And we also can't wait to shout you out when you buy us a coffee.
Yeah, we are so grateful for your help, like literally fueling our podcast. We are using our own time and resources to produce this content. So any way that you're able to support, whether that's following the show wherever you listen, or leaving a review, or maybe you're sending an episode to a friend that you think would like it, or buying us a coffee, all of those ways are greatly appreciated. The other thing that we have to catch up on is Shaochen. You just got back from your very first ever business retreat. I think on Friday you got back, right?
On Thursday, yeah.
On Thursday.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, it looked like so much fun. I was looking at the behind the scenes on Instagram and I was like, I have so much FOMO right now.
No, I wish you were there.
So I know I would love to hear, how was it?
Yeah, so last year, if you guys have been following me for a while, I kind of went on my own personal business retreat where I just booked a cabin kind of in the woods, far away from my day-to-day life, just so I could take a step back from my business and look at it from a distance instead of working in it. And that was so helpful for me that I decided to go on a more organized business retreat this year. And it was hosted by Layli Imadi. It was her next level retreat. And she focuses on creative business educators, which is exactly where I want to be and where I am right now. And I've been following her for a while. I knew I wanted to learn from her in some format. And I'm really glad I went. It was this really cool, intimate experience. There was about 16 of us. And it was just a really nice balance of rest and connection. And then, like I said, doing the work on your business instead of being in your business.
Yeah, that's awesome. It looked like so much fun. And the house that you guys stayed in looked incredible. I was drooling over that cool setup.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any key takeaways or learnings or, favorite experiences that you want to share with us?
Yeah. And yeah, that house, I hope she does it again there because it was so cool. Like we like didn't leave. There-
There's no reason to. It looked
yeah.
like it had everything you could possibly need.
It did, and we didn't even utilize all of the features like the fire pit and the ping pong table and the pool table, like so many cool
Oh
little
my
like
gosh.
nooks and crannies in there too. But yeah, so like this is actually the first time Aline and I are catching up about the retreat. And so I did kind of think about like what are my takeaways. Still kind of like processing the experience too. And we are planning to come out with another episode later this year on investing in business education. So I'm gonna just share a couple like top of mind things um for now. And the first thing was when I got to the retreat, I immediately knew I was in the right room with the right people, which oh, I don't know, this is like the first time I've done something like this, and I don't think I realized like the power of that. Like all the people around me were people who were a couple steps ahead of me in terms of what I wanted to do. There were a lot of podcasters, which was awesome because this is a pretty new venture for us. So I knew I had a lot to learn there. There was someone who actually had a podcasting business. And then there were people who had like making $1 million in revenue in a year. And there was someone who
Wild.
had like 6 businesses. And it was just like, I mean, it was mostly women. It was a very much like girl boss type of moment. Someone did their intro and she was like, I feel so much imposter syndrome right now. And I couldn't believe she said that because I felt imposter syndrome being around her. And honestly, that was like a good feeling because I like being in those kinds of spaces where I know that I can learn from all the people around me, that I'm not the person who already knows everything, you know? I think there's a level of confidence when you are that person who already knows everything, and that's cool. But in order for us to really learn and grow and push ourselves, we have to put ourselves in the room where we are not the person who knows everything, right? And we can learn from everybody else because they've already done some of the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when I get in rooms like that, it's just so inspiring and motivating. And I know like I always leave those situations feeling so lit up about everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, if they're doing it, like I can figure out how to do it. And you get all of these new viewpoints and perspectives that maybe you hadn't even been exposed to before. And so just hearing all of that, I feel like it's always that like kick in the butt that you need to just go figure out what is next or what am I going to do with this or how am I going to take this and apply it to my business now.
Yeah, and like also seeing that those people are just like normal people like you and me, that's also very like
Yeah.
helpful and humbling too, that they're not like some super person you see online because they have 300,000 followers or something. Like, yeah, they do, but they're also like, it's like we could do that too. It gives me the
Right.
sense that like there's nothing that makes them like superhuman or anything like that. Well, they're just building this business one step at a time, like the rest of us, and
Yeah.
they're like figuring it out as they go.
Yeah. I feel like it's very validating for your own experiences, right? Like it just reminds you that you're not alone and that you are going in the right direction and wherever you're dreaming of, like you can get there. And those people, even though like maybe you're looking up to them, because like you said, they're a couple steps ahead of you, it's like they are also looking up to people who are a couple steps ahead of them. And it's just this really cool like ladder of
Mhm.
everybody just trying to improve themselves a little bit more every day or week or year to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. The second thing I wanted to share was something that Laylee is, I guess, kind of like her motto. Like people who know her well know that this is like something she says often, which is like, take what you need, leave the rest. And I love that because it really treated us like adults. Like, not all 16 of us have to be doing the same coordinated activity at the same time. Like, it was actually a pretty free flowing agenda and schedule. It was like a loose thing. And it very much had more to do with like, how's everybody vibing? How are the conversations going? But in that, I also learned that you also need to ask for what you need. Like, in order to take what you need, sometimes you need to ask for it. So, like, you could have spent all the time at the pool if you wanted, right? But I knew there were certain people that I wanted to have conversations with. And I knew that I didn't want to leave the retreat without having those conversations. So, one of them was with Paige of the legal page. I had some questions I wanted to ask, legal questions, and she had offered that kind of advice. So, I made sure that I got to have my time to ask my questions. I also got like an SEO review. There were some people from Showit who were at the retreat. I got a couple minutes with Laylee to talk about this new mentoring program that I'm launching. So it's like, I love the take what you need, but also like advocate for yourself and make sure that you're asking for what you need in order to get that.
I love that. It's like putting the responsibility on you, right? Like at the end of the day, you can put yourself in a course or at a retreat or join a group coaching program or whatever the case may be. But if you aren't taking the initiative and putting the work in, whether that's, connecting with somebody, talking to them, it's like you can only get so far. So I love that it's like putting that kind of responsibility back on you, right? Like they're here to share their expertise, but you also need to be willing to like show up and do the work.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You have to also sometimes be vulnerable too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then kind of like working backwards from that point, it really helped me to set intentions before like diving into the retreat. Because in order to know what you want to get out of the retreat, you have to also be kind of like clear headed about what you want going into it. So like I said, otherwise you might leave without some of the things you wanted or regret that you didn't have the opportunity because like it is a really cool opportunity to be in a room with all those people at the same time, right? So setting intentions before you head in to your retreat or your conference or whatever it is that you're going to is a really important one.
I'm actually starting a new group coaching program this week, and I'm doing the same thing. Like literally this morning when I was journaling, doing my morning journal, I wrote down like, what do I want to get out of the next 6 months? So that I had a really clear direction and I knew how I was going to, conduct myself or show up within this new group program. Like I know I want to be a part of the calls. I know I want to be vulnerable, even though it's scary, and put myself out there and make connections with these other people that I'm going to be in the room with. So I feel like it's super important to do that. And I love the way that you phrased it because regardless of whether or not an investment is fully aligned, because you're never going to have that answer when you're investing in yourself or your business. But if you can get clear about what you want out of it, then you're always going to be able to walk away with something and it's always going to be a good investment, even if maybe it wasn't like the absolute perfect one for you, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I can't wait until we regroup on this in a couple months and share more insights on what we learned with like these kinds of business investments.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good episode. I've already been like taking notes as I've been thinking through all of this and like watching you experience your retreat and me going into this coaching program and both of us having made previous investments in our business. I think it's going to be a really great episode because it can get hard to know like where do I put my time and my money if I am looking to grow a specific area. So we're excited for that one. But that's awesome. I'm so glad that you went, that you put yourself out there, that you had those couple days. Again, I know it was like in the middle of a very busy season. And we were in the middle of bringing the podcast back and launching this website for the very first time. But hopefully you also got some like well-deserved and probably much needed rest while you were there as well. And got to do some just lounging by the pool.
Yep, definitely did some of that. All right, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. We're talking about our top tips for navigating busy season, avoiding burnout, and staying motivated in both our work and life. And we draw a lot of this from our recent personal experiences. And we kind of realized as we were jotting down our notes that we have two kind of categories for our tips. And so the first tips we're going to share are 3 ways to take care of your work, and then 3 ways to take care of your life or yourself during busy season. So let's start off with the 3 ways to take care of your work. Elaine, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So the first tip that we want to share is be realistic and ruthlessly prioritize. What do we mean by this? I have realized that it can be really easy to overestimate what you can actually accomplish in a single day. And the reality is that life can also just get in the way sometimes. Something that I've been doing this year that's worked really well for me is instead of having, my long to-do list for each day, I try to identify my top like 1 to 3 non-negotiable tasks and focus on those first before moving on to that never-ending to-do list. So I've actually been using the full focus planner. I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm one of those people that like starts a planner and then falls off within the first couple months and just doesn't stick with it. But this one I have stuck with all year so far. Very proud of myself about that. But I think that the reason that I'm loving it and it's really working for me is because at the top of each like daily page spread, there's a section where you can write down what are your big 3 tasks for that day. So I love being able to jot those down in my planner every single day and be able to reference those as I'm going about my day. I don't always have 3 on my list. It really depends on my schedule. Like, for example, if we're recording a podcast episode, I know that I might not have time to prioritize 3 other big tasks today because
Mhm,
recording an episode is one of them.
mhm.
So I just try to be realistic about what I can actually accomplish with the time that I have during that day. And then as long as I can check off whatever is listed under that big 3, then I end the day feeling productive, feeling like I'm in a good place, rather than feeling defeated or disappointed in myself for not getting every single thing on my to-do list done.
Mhm. I have a similar process. I use the golden coil for my planner. It's like a customizable planner, so you get to choose what layouts you want. Because similar to you, if I don't have like my planner in the format that I want, I won't use it. And what I like to do is write down my top priorities for the week. And for me, it's more than 3 typically because it's for the week. But then from there, once I know what the priorities are for the week, I kind of like pick up to 3 for each day. So I always have like my bigger picture of what I want to accomplish for the week and then how I'm going to make progress towards that for each day. But it's a very similar process to you where it's like I try to not overwhelm myself with all of the like smaller stuff, which I also jot down in a separate column, but it's more of like I can pull in one of these things if I finish my like big 3.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Again, it can get really easy to be looking at that run on to do list of all of the things that you have to do for your business, whether it's client work or update reviews on your website or whatever the case may be. But I love how you take the approach, and I do this as well, of like, what are the top priorities for this week? And then, you could even go like, what is it that I'm working on this month, this quarter, et cetera. But taking those top priorities and then distilling that down into like the manageable tasks for each day rather than just your whole list of every single idea or to do that comes into your mind. Going back to what you said too about setting intentions when going into a new business investment, I feel like it's the exact same idea here, right? It's like you want to set an intention for yourself at the start of each day so that you feel like you actually achieved something. We always want to set ourselves up for success rather than setting ourselves up for that defeat or like sense of failure. I think about my dog, Oliver, when it comes to this idea. I've heard this said in dog training too, of like put your dog in situations where you know they're going to succeed, not fail, right? So like I know now the types of environments and situations that he thrives in, and I know the ones where he doesn't. So like I'm never going to put him in an environment or a situation that's going to cause him anxiety or set him up to fail or cause him to like do something that I would say is like quote unquote bad behavior because he's not going to know any better, right? Like if I let him off leash at a place where I shouldn't be letting him off leash and he sees a squirrel and takes off, that's on me. That's not on my dog. So I feel like it's the same idea with planning our days. Just to kind of like tie this one up, I feel like it's kind of a 3-parter here, but I would encourage you to set the realistic expectations for yourself, determine what accomplishment actually looks like for that day, and then just keep your never-ending to-do list separate from the non-negotiables for that day and focus on what actually needs to get done in that moment rather than looking at, a 20-page list.
Yeah, and so the other, like, half of this tip, this very long first tip was, like, be realistic, which we just talked about, and ruthlessly prioritize, and so I wanna talk about the ruthlessly prioritize part. So, yeah, we start off with these good intentions and setting out plans for ourselves. It could be easy to skip the planning step when you're really busy, but like Elaine just said about, like, setting yourself up for success, it's even more important because you need to make sure that you are being strategic about how you spend your very limited time. And so you go in with your priorities for the day. Like maybe I'm in production for a wedding. So, like Monday, I want to do welcome sign and some small signage. And then I want to work on the seating chart for the next 2 days. And then the rest of the week is for place cards or something. So you set out your timeline for yourself day by day and your priorities. But if I start slipping on that timeline, where I need to get ruthless about prioritization is to be reevaluating constantly where I am on that production plan. And it's not about like penalizing myself if I slip on the schedule or something like that. It's just more about the awareness at the start and the end of each day to know like am I on track to hit my deadlines or not? And if the answer is no, I'm not, then what do I need to adjust? Do I have the ability to give myself a little bit more time because the seating chart's taking me longer than I expected? Or do I have something that's in my top 3 that needs to be cut so that I can give myself more time? Because that's something I absolutely have to get done, right? Like, I can't imagine the seating chart not being done. That's like a non-negotiable, right? And so maybe I need to not do my social media posts this week because that's actually not going to be directly revenue generating, or it's not like I'm not on the hook for it from like a client work perspective, right? Or maybe emails aren't happening. I'm not responding to emails except for the people who have weddings this month. That happens a lot, honestly, in busy season. And that's kind of what I mean by ruthlessly prioritize, because it doesn't like feel good to quote unquote drop the ball. But sometimes you have to just not do the things that are important in order to get the things that are important done. So I'm going to actually roll right into our second work related tip, which is communicate the expectations and boundaries to your clients and collaborators. So this goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about, because you might have a lot of unhappy potential clients or clients if you never listen their emails. So when it comes to not doing something that someone else is expecting you to do, you need to communicate and be clear on what they can expect from you. So on the email one, which I think like freaks a lot of people out who like to get to inbox zero, like put in your email signature that it's busy season and they can expect to hear from you within like 4 business days. Like give yourself a little bit of breathing room. You can put whatever you want to clarify in that signature and like highlight it or bold it or whatever, so that you're trying to communicate that expectation to anybody who's emailing you. And in terms of creating boundaries, this can also be including your business hours in your signature too. And this can be something you do year round, not just during busy season. So like maybe you are, in the office between 10 to 4, Monday through Wednesday or something. And then the rest of the week, you're just focused on client production. So you're not really at your computer or emails or whatever your schedule looks like for you. Just communicate that, because I think in our society, in our culture, we're so used to people being online 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And as an entrepreneur, especially if you're a side hustler, that's just often that's not what your schedule looks like. So just make sure you're communicating that in some way.
Exactly. And even with the interactions that I have had with my own clients, and then also interactions that I have had with other business owners, like if I'm working with somebody on something, it doesn't like, I don't actually care if it's going to take you a little bit to get back to me. And I know that my clients don't like, they're not going to get mad if they haven't heard from me in a couple of days. It's just all about, like you said, communicating when you can actually expect to get that proposal or hear back from you or whatever the case may be. People just want to know, like, yes, you're on my radar, and I promise I will get back to you by this date.
Mhm. Yeah.
Something that I actually do is I just always have my vacation responder on in Gmail. It's an automated message, and I say that in the email just to confirm that their email is received. And then I let them know that they can hear from me in 2 to 4 business days, since it is currently wedding season. And even when it's not wedding season, I keep that on just because I feel like it's just nice to email somebody and be like, okay, cool. They did get my message and this is when I can hear from them, even if it is within 24 hours or, whatever the case may be, not during wedding season. So that just helps take a little bit of pressure off of me from having to respond right away or feeling like I need to respond right away, because I know that every time somebody's emailing me, they are getting an auto response that clearly outlines when they should expect to hear from me by.
Mhm. So to add on to that, it's also important to communicate your timelines and expectations with collaborators, whether that's like other wedding vendors that you're working with, other business partners. So I'll give an example with our podcast. Elaine and I, we tag team with the production work for the podcast. So like editing and show notes, like all of that kind of stuff. And our schedule, like each of our schedule affects the other person's schedule. So like I usually do the first pass of the editing and then pass it on to Elaine. And so our editing timelines, because obviously this is not our full-time job, like with the podcast, we have a lot of other things going on. So our timelines don't have a lot of wiggle room. So we need to make sure we're communicating if we have to adjust a timeline and how that impacts the other person. Just trying to be really considerate and understanding to each other. And so sometimes if one person's really busy, then the other person might take over a task too, or we might switch roles. So again, kind of going back to that, like communication and ruthlessly prioritize, just like constantly iterating and adjusting. And it's always better to communicate and ask for the help than try to just like bulldozer through it and like work until 2 a.m. every day because like that's not great for your mental health either. And you're probably not producing your best work. So it's just good to continually think about like, how can I adjust based on where I am to produce my best work? And a lot of times that includes just being clear on your communication and expectations. I'm going to share another example of like a client boundary you can set to help you navigate busy season and not get caught up in like more work than you need to be doing, which is making sure that when you are in the design review process, that you are being really clear on how many rounds of feedback are included for your client and also how much it costs if your client needs more revisions. So you'll definitely want this outlined in your contract, but also make sure that you're on the same page when you're actually in the design stage and communicating with your client about the design. Like when you're handing the design over to them, make sure they know how many rounds of feedback they get with you. Because this will also really help your client to make sure they consolidated their feedback. Because sometimes what I find, especially if you're working with a couple, is the bride will have an opinion and they'll send that to you. And then they'll talk to their groom and then he'll have an opinion. And then so you want them to talk to each other first and then talk to you, you know? And I think communicating that as far as like, hey, like you have a limited amount of design review with me. And if you need more than that, you have to pay. Like that really helps them to like communicate with each other and consolidate their thoughts first.
Yeah, and I feel like as well, I am a self-proclaimed people pleaser, but I feel like as people pleasers, it can feel like maybe scary or like a little uncomfortable to set those boundaries with clients or with, vendors, whoever it is that you're working with. But I have found that it takes so much stress and mental pressure off of yourself if you know that you are clearly communicating every single thing right off the bat and that you don't need to, because then if something does come up, then you can say, oh, well, we are now on design revision 4, and that is now going into extra as communicated when I onboarded you, like it's going to be this much extra, or whatever the case may be. But I feel like it also just allows you to operate from a much calmer headspace than like feeling stressed out about how you're going to deal with certain situations.
Yeah, I think as much as someone might not want to pay extra, they would prefer not to be surprised even more, right? So like just having that communicated up front and then they can decide like, is this extra revision worth it to me to pay or not? Now that's their decision, something you've already communicated to them.
Right, exactly. So, the third way to take care of your work that we wanted to chat about today is using the power of systems in your business. So, you know me, I'm a systems girly, but having proper systems in place is a huge part of being able to navigate stress and overwhelm during busier seasons. As I mentioned before, having that automatic reply set up in your email really takes the pressure off of feeling like you have to respond to emails right away. And so, in addition to my vacation responder that I just have set at all times in Gmail, I also have auto replies built into my actual workflow in Honeybook for new inquiries. So like if somebody fills out my contact form, they get an automated response saying like, your inquiry was received and this is when you can hear back from me. Having a CRM, which is a client relationship management tool like Honeybook or Dipsado that can do things like send proposals, contracts, and invoices all in one file is also super, super helpful, especially during the busy season. When you are busy in the studio working on client projects or whatever the case may be, you don't really have a ton of extra time to be going back and forth on emails for proposals or manually processing invoice and contracts, right? Like your time is in the studio creating. So while I was preoccupied these last 2 weeks with both weddings and our podcast tasks, I was still able to effortlessly book a new 2025 couple as well as a mentoring client. And for me, it's just so important that my business can still run and I can still make money, even when I don't have a ton of time for the admin side of things. So I also was able to then feel way more relaxed about them taking that next step because I knew that as soon as they submitted their deposits, they were going to get another automated email from me thanking them, letting them know what to expect for the onboarding process and when we're going to kick those things off. And so that takes that pressure off of me of having to onboard them immediately. Like I knew that I didn't have to get to it last week right after they signed and submitted because they already got that like extra touch point, just confirming that everything was received. This is when you'll hear from me and this is what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah, I love that, and I also really love the automatic payment reminders because then I don't have to be the one awkwardly being like, "Hello, your payment's due in 2 days." Like, there is literally a system reminder that does that, and pretty much everyone has paid on time because they get my annoying CRM reminders that I don't have to send by myself. Um but also, like, for me, how I leverage this with my client workflows is I'll have Dubsado, which I use for my CRM, send me reminders when it's time for my client's 6-week check-in. So 6 weeks before their wedding, I have kind of like a wedding checklist for them. And that's when we start finalizing designs and things like that. It reminds me when it's time to ask for a review, for photos, like all of those repetitive tasks that I do with my client. And I could also have Dubsado just send those emails automatically for me, but I like to look at them and I like to personalize them before I send them out because some clients I might already be working with before the 6 weeks hits. Like I have very proactive clients who just reach out to me and like want to start things a little bit sooner. But then I get those reminders in my inbox and it's really easy for me to then go into Zipsado and just send that email out real quick. And I think that's just a reminder too, is like systems can work for you in the way that you want them to. Like systems can fully automate your process. Like I said, they could send those emails for me, but they can also send me a reminder. And so whatever level of comfort that you have with systems doing stuff for you, you can make that work for you through a like a CRM type system.
Yep, exactly. That's why I love systems so much because whether you're doing automations or you're just having the templates and the reminders built in, it saves you so much time. And again, it just like frees up that mental load of feeling like, oh my gosh, am I forgetting something? Am I dropping the ball on something? Like, no, we have the technology to be able to put all of these things in place so that we don't have to worry about it and we can continue on with the thing that people are actually hiring us for, which is actually making calligraphy, right? Like people aren't hiring us to send a proposal. They're hiring us to create for their wedding.
Yeah, yeah.
We will put links for both Honeybook and Dubsado in the show notes. So if you are not using a CRM yet in your business, but want to give one a try, I think we both have free trials in our links. So you could try both and then decide. I did that when I was looking for a CRM. So those are our 3 ways to take care of your work during busy season. So now we're going to chat about 3 ways to take care of yourself. So number 1 is to schedule time for yourself. We can get very easily caught up in work and the demands of running a business that we tend to forget to, or at least I don't know about everybody else, but I tend to forget to listen to what my body and mind really needs. And it's very easy for me to just prioritize client work and keep going, going, going and feel guilty taking a break when there are so many other things to do. But I have learned that it's so important to remember that giving yourself an opportunity to reset and recharge is actually going to allow you to show up even better in your business. Like, I wonder if you experienced this after coming back from the next level retreat. Like, did you feel, I don't know, lighter, less stressed, or, more energized?
Yeah. I definitely felt like more energized and like also just from the conversations we had there, I felt like I had better direction about where like how I wanted to execute on certain things. So yeah, I agree. Taking like a break sometimes is really what you need to be reinvigorated.
Yeah, and I feel like it gives you some clarity too because you're able to step back, not focus on whatever it is that you've been spinning your wheels over, and then you can come back with a fresh perspective. So, for example, I last week I had a bit of a hectic schedule. Honestly, from last Sunday till last Wednesday night, it was just a constant go, go, go. And Wednesday was a big day because I had a mentoring call at 9 a.m. And then I had to drive to Long Island right after that to deliver a wedding, which was just already causing me so much anxiety just thinking about it because I knew I had to drive through Manhattan to get to Long Island. Like, I am not a confident driver. I was just feeling all kinds of stress about it. And knowing that I really wasn't going to have much downtime that day because I had a mentoring call and I knew I was going to be in the car for at least 3 to 4 hours delivering this wedding, I was like, maybe I should use that time before my mentoring call to try to catch up on some emails or get ahead on a few things. But that also just started to feel really overwhelming in that moment. So I took a minute, I paused, I was like, listen to what is your body saying? What do you actually need right now? And I realized that I needed to create a very calm morning for myself. So instead of just diving into work at 8 a.m., I decided to start the morning with a book and some coffee and breakfast before my call. And I knew that whatever needed to get done that day, I could do it when I got back home from Long Island. And like that was behind me. So just listening to myself and what I needed allowed me to start the day in a much clearer and calmer headspace. And it just helped reduce some of that anxiety that I was feeling
Mhm.
about making the drive, honestly, because I had that slow morning. I got on my mentoring call. That was really great. And then I was like, okay, you're gonna get in the car. You're gonna take your time. You're gonna make your way through Manhattan slowly but surely.
Yeah. I love the kind of underlying theme of this episode, like, that I've heard come up several times. It's just like, be intentional about your day, your schedule, your priorities. It's so easy for us to open our computer, immediately look at our email and start going through that. And I'm guilty of that too, being like the first thing that I do. It's hard. What you did is so much harder is to actually take a step back and be like, what is my body telling me? And what do I need in this moment to set myself up for success for the rest of the day? I'll be honest, I took a nap before we recorded this podcast. I was very, very tired this morning. I'm not really a caffeine person. And when I do drink caffeine, it only masks my tiredness. Like I just feel kind of jittery and not at my best. So I was like, instead of drinking coffee, I'm going to take a nap and that'll hopefully set me up better for the rest of my day. And I think it's hard to make those choices when you already feel like your time is so limited. Similarly, like I am more productive if I can get some movement in. So even if that's 15, 20 minutes, I use like the Peloton app at home, like that helps me so much if I can just like take a little bit of time to do that in my day. And I also make sure that I have my chiropractor appointments booked on my calendar. And also I do like a monthly massage. I kind of like spread those out in my month. And those are just things that are on my calendar that I don't move. Even if I'm going through a really busy time, I like schedule around those things because those are like non-negotiables for me to take care of myself.
Yeah, I love that. And the reality is when you are a business owner, you like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like I could literally be working 24/7. Like there's always something to do, whether it's client work or you want to work on a new idea or you need to update your website or update email templates. Like it literally never ends. And so what I have found over the years after burning myself out and just working nonstop is like you have to make time for yourself because nobody else is going to make that time for you. So, like, if you actually care about, the way that you're feeling both physically and mentally, and if you can recognize that prioritizing that self-care is going to allow you to show up as a better business owner, then you're the only person that can make time for that. So, I love that you have those appointments like standing on the calendar as non-negotiables regardless. Like that's why I like the gym that I belong to, I have to book a class in order to go. And if I cancel within 12 hours, I get charged.
Mhm.
And like that the reason that I'm a part of that type of a system is so that it holds me to it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I need that
Or else I just
accountability.
wouldn't go.
Right. Yeah. Take what you need, like we said earlier in the episode, to borrow Laylee's saying. And that leads us
Yeah.
to our next point about celebrating your wins.
Yeah, so I am such a big fan of celebrating your wins or giving yourself something to look forward to when you're in the middle of a busy season. It really doesn't have to be anything crazy or extravagant. I feel like I used to think like, "Oh, that means I need to go take myself out to like a really fancy dinner," but it's not that at all. If that's what you want it to be, that's great. But like for last week, for example, when I, was just kind of nonstop for 4 or 5 days straight, my motivation for getting through the week was I knew that I had a girls' night to look forward to on Friday. We were gonna order in Thai food, and we watched the new season that just came out of Emily in Paris, which was just lovely. And then I had a trip upstate on Saturday to go celebrate my friend's new house. So even though last week was just crazy with work and I was even up until midnight one night, which like, if you know me, that's way past my bedtime. I was in bed at 9 o'clock last night. I had two exciting things that I was really looking forward to. And I knew that once I got through, Friday, 4 p.m., like I was going to be able to turn off and just rest and reset with some, rejuvenate with friend time and being out in nature, all of that once the weekend actually came. So it's kind of that like light at the end of the tunnel. So I like to put those little things on my calendar too, especially even when it does feel like maybe I'm too tired to go hang out with my friend, which I very could have easily like canceled on her on Friday night. But I knew that being with her was going to like make me feel alive and just more like a normal human being again.
Yeah. No, I love that reminder, and Elaine knows I'm not the best at this, like, celebrating wins one, and I'm working on it, but I also love the reminder that it doesn't have to be something big or something crazy. It's literally just having something on your calendar to look forward to, and we all need that, especially when we're in the thick of it. So, it's nice to have somebody in your corner to remind you to prioritize yourself and your wins, and so hopefully it could be us on this podcast reminding you to do that right now. So, our last tip for taking care of yourself during busy season is to start saying no. I'm so guilty of having FOMO all of the time, but being able to say no is such an important skill and one that you might have to like hone and practice. Sometimes you do have to turn down dream jobs because you've overcommitted, and taking on another job, even if it's a dream job, is going to really put your mental health, at risk. And hopefully your calendar is already booked with other dream clients and things that you enjoy doing. Saying no is so important because not only can it alleviate burnout, but it can also help you prevent burnout. And sometimes this goes for personal commitments too. Like if you're overcommitted on the work side of things, you might have to turn down some personal things. And so I think like going through that, it just helps us to evaluate what do we want in the future and helps us evaluate what is the balance that we want to have. There are going to be times where we say yes to things that we maybe wish we said no to, but we can use those data points to help us determine what is the ideal number of clients I should take on each month, or, how many projects do I need to also be able to spend time with my family in the way that I want to, and things like that. And I know for me, this is kind of a reminder more for me than anyone else, but it's easy to punt our to-dos and worries down the road, but I need to remember that, like, future me has to deliver whatever present me commits to. I think a lot of times I'm like, "This is a problem for future me, and I need to work on that."
Yeah. It's like future you still comes to life at some
Yeah.
point. Yeah, I feel like going back to what you said before, it really just it all comes down to being intentional, and whether that's, at the start of each year saying, "Okay, I'm looking at the calendar and these are the ideal number of jobs or clients I would like to have each month. And this is, kind of an ideal number of times I want to be out of the office or on vacation or spending time with my family or whatever the case may be." But taking the time to, like you said, be intentional with that and also listen to what am I actually asking for? What do I actually need right now in this moment? Or what do I think future me is going to want or need in that moment? And then using that to kind of guide your decisions. Practicing saying no is something that I have really been embracing over like the last year or two. I have reframed FOMO in my mind as, instead of the fear of missing out, I now just tell myself it's the fun of missing out
I love that.
instead of fear.
Because 'Cause you're
Because I
probably
think
doing
this is,
something else you love instead if you're missing out, right?
yeah, or just like enjoying snuggling on the couch with my dog and watching Selling Sunset. Like,
Yeah, take what you need.
exactly. It's all about just taking what you need. And I don't know, I think that this is maybe also, I feel this more as I've gotten older. I don't know about you. And I guess it's just that, your priorities shift and things that were once important to you are no longer as important to you. But I don't know. I feel like I hit 35 and I got tired and I just started to care more about like what I want and my own mental health and what well-being than like what other people thought. So I feel like I feel a lot of FOMO in like, social things. Like, am I going to miss out on that event or that gathering or whatever? But I'm like, do I really want to trek to Brooklyn on a Tuesday night? No, I don't. So I'm going to stay home.
Yeah.
So that brings us to our third and final tip for the ways to take care of yourself during busy season. And I don't know about you, but I loved this conversation so much. I hope our listeners do too. We can't wait to hear what your favorite takeaways are. And definitely let us know if this does indeed help you navigate your next busy season. And okay, so as we were drafting the notes for this, I want to find a new word for busy. I don't like that word.
It has more of like a not a negative connotation, but like it stresses me out just saying that word.
Right, exactly. And also, like, I think it's reframing the way that you look at things, right? Like, yeah, we've had so much going on these past couple weeks, but I'm also like, but these are all things that we get to do. And that's so freaking cool that like we get to record a podcast and we got to launch the website. And like I got to work with two really awesome couples in September. Like, and so I feel like because busy has a negative connotation, but I'm trying to look at the things that are on my list as like, oh, I get to do these things. I have these opportunities. Like they don't add up, but even while I was drafting the notes for this episode, I still couldn't think of a better replacement for busy. I was like, maybe it's like a full season, like fuller seasons of business or life. I don't know.
I love that word actually, full. I mean, I feel like we are all leading full lives as entrepreneurs just on a regular basis. But then like saying that it's like a fuller season, it's like on top of whatever your already full life is, like you're doing even more. I like that. And it does feel very like rewarding and positive. But just to wrap up our episode, if you enjoyed this episode, if it was helpful, please support us by leaving us a rating or review. You can do that really quickly on Apple or on Spotify. You can leave us a comment even. And you can help us fuel our pod, like we mentioned in the beginning, with our new Buy Me a Coffee website that we will link in the show notes. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to our show. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us wherever you're listening and leave us a quick rating.
And don't forget, you can find us on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner and send us a DM to let us know how you're liking the show. Until next time, keep the ink flowing and the dreams growing.